So I start with a little Sufi story that also doubles as a joke. This is a philosophy professor walked in to give his class their final. Placing his chair on his desk, the professor instructed the class. Using every applicable thing you've learned in this course, prove to me that this chair does not exist. So, pencils writing and erasers erasing, the students launched into their epic essays to prove that this chair didn't exist. Except that was for one student, Maria. She spent 30 seconds writing her answer and promptly turned in her paper to the astonishment of both her peers and the professor, and returned to her seat to await the end of the lesson. Time went by, and the day came when all the students get their final grades. And to the amazement of the class, Maria, the student who wrote for 30 seconds, received the highest grade in the class. And her answer to the question, which quite transported the philosophy professor himself, what chair? Okay. So the premise of my talk today is that the spiritual path calls us, and I might even say demands, that we question our limiting assumptions. And so I begin with a definition of the spiritual path for me. And what it has begun for me is a journey of consciousness. And so I'm going to start with a slide. You know I had to, okay? I had to. I just couldn't resist. So when we're born, we're a blank slate, right? We're a blank slate. We're wide open. We're connected. We're free. We just get to be this little human being. And we're completely unencumbered. We're completely free. And to me, that it just is a perfect example of let's just be free. I'm free. I don't have anything on me. It's wonderful. I just love that. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And so as I was working on this talk, this image came to my mind that when we're brand new, we have an infinite perspective. So when we're brand new, our consciousness is like the top of that V, right? We're brand new. We're connected, we're open, we're free, we don't have any encumbrances, we're right there, okay? And then life starts to happen. So, we're the baby, we learn to crawl, we bonk our head, we learn to toddle, and all of a sudden we learn to toddle, and the first word we're taught is what? No. We're taught no. No, don't touch that, don't do that, right? Because our parents have to do that to keep us safe, right? But at the same time, we start to internalize no, right? Then we go to school, and we learn that things must be done in a certain way. And this memory came to mind. On my very first day of kindergarten, I was sent home because I was wearing pants. Yeah, like, whoa, okay. So I'm sure we all have memories from school about things that had to be done just so, a certain way, or else, that was it. And then puberty happens, and we all know about puberty. Oh my Lord, we know how that went, right? When you think about it, you go, ugh. Right? You just don't want it. You push it to the side because it's just so, ugh. And so it goes, high school and college and jobs and relationship, and so on and on and on it goes on our human journey. And so what came to me was as we're on our human journey, our perspective starts to get smaller and smaller, right? Because we've become trained to kind of narrow our perspective into a certain way, okay? And so on our journey, we pick up attitudes and beliefs about ourselves and about the world, and we become sort of encased, and we learn not to question these limiting beliefs. We just are taught, as you know, to kind of go along, and we're not taught to go, well, wait a minute, okay? And so our perspective gets narrower and narrower, and we begin to perceive that we don't really have much power, right, to change our circumstances. That just, we sort of absorb from the world at large that this is the way it is, and we just have to go along with it. And I think for most of us in the Western world, this is a very common experience. And again, this is sort of coming from my own experience, but I think many of you can probably relate that as we grow, we develop these limiting perceptions of ourselves and the world. And so this brings us to the spiritual path. Okay, so eventually we get down and down and down into our infinite, we've become shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and eventually we develop these little boxes, right, about our perceptions about how we should look, how we should talk, how we should act, how we should eat, where we should work, who we should marry, and we start to develop these paradigms, I guess is the right word. And we kind of feel like we're just subject to the randomness of the universe, right? And so we have to start to think about what are these little boxes. And so I have a little clip for you to enjoy about our little boxes.
Hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. And the
Yeah, so you can relate, right? We all have our little ticky-tacky boxes, okay? So that's what happens. We get our input perspective and then we're distilled down into our little boxes, okay? And then I kind of liken it to a boat trip. This is the image that came to my mind, is before we get on the spiritual path, it's like, okay, I want to go to Bermuda. So I know a tiny bit. So I get in a boat and I imagine that the boat's just going to take me to Bermuda. So I'm just in my little boat, and the boat, I don't know anything about sailing, but I assume that the boat's just going to do what it does. And it takes me a really long time, and I might get to Bermuda, but I might not, right? And then I realize, oh, okay, so I'm in a place where I didn't know that I didn't know. And that's kind of the stages of our consciousness. We don't know that we don't know. Before we get on the spiritual path, we're just sort of walking around, at the whim of the randomness of the universe. And then we wake up a little bit. We find a spiritual community and we start to learn some stuff. And I can kind of relate that to my own journey. When I got to Unity, I felt that way. I didn't know that I didn't know. And then when I got to Unity, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know. And I became like a crazy person, just starving for information. And I was in the bookstore, and I was in the library, and I was pigeonholing people like Neil. Neil remembers. And I would be like, tell me. And I was just like a sponge, because I knew that I didn't know, and I wanted to know. So back to our sailing analogy. Okay, so now I know this isn't working. So I got to learn how to sail. So I've got to go to sailing school. I've got to apprentice myself to someone who really knows what they're doing. I've got to practice. I've got to build in my neural network of sailing skills, right? And I've got to practice it so much that I know that I know. It becomes automatic. So we go from don't know, I know that I don't know, to I know that I know. So that's the goal. I know that I know. So we know that we're loved. We know that we're connected. That's our goal, is to remember that, to know that we know. okay? And so part of that learning is unlearning the things that we've internalized, okay? So we begin to question our limiting beliefs. We begin to examine those assumptions. And so what happens is we realize we now know that we're in a box. Before we didn't know it, but now we know. Oh man, I'm in a box. What am I going to do to get out of this box? And so we hit the spiritual path, and our perspective starts to widen again. Does that make sense? Can you relate to that? Have you experienced that? Where you begin to get a wider perspective as you start to surrender this limiting worldview. Okay, and so one of these important tools, really important tools, is to question. So that comes to my next slide. Who says? It's a really important question. Who says? When you start thinking about the things that you've internalized, you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, where did that come from? And so this is a really important tool to think about who says. And the other one is, what if? Who says and what if? So we want to take ourselves out of that limiting place and ask questions that open us up. Make sense? So now, I want you to think about something. Just kind of close your eyes and call to mind something that could be something you want to change. It could be something that you've assumed about yourself all along that you never questioned. Pick an assumption that you make about yourself that you think could possibly be fairly limited. Think about that. Call to mind something, or call to mind a challenge. Okay. And now, open your eyes and stand up. Hands on your hips. And repeat after me. Who says?
Who says?
So think about that. Call it to mind. And can you feel the who says? Can you feel it? Who says? Who says? Okay, you can sit down. Yeah, Edie says you can sit down. And so begin to ask that question. Who says? Where'd that come from? And so you can start to root out these weeds that have sprung up in your consciousness, okay? Because remember, the spiritual path is we're expanding our consciousness once again. We're expanding our perspective, okay? So now we're going to consider the other side of that. So I want you to think about a situation, close your eyes and think about a situation where you feel like angry or frustrated, or could be anything, just something where you feel a limiting emotion of some kind. And this is something that you've got a problem and you have no idea how to solve it, and you just feel frustrated, you feel angry or something like that. You have that? Now, ask this question. What if? So what if there were an elegant solution to this? Or if it's something you don't know? What if I did know? What if I knew? What if I could? What if it were possible? Do you see where we're going with this? Okay, can you feel the shift in your energy? So the simple questions of who says and what if are just simple energy changers, because when we're in our box, we can now remember, oh, I'm in my box, right? That's box thinking. And I can ask the what if questions. One of the anecdotes that's told about Einstein is one of the reasons he was so brilliant is he would go into this sort of daydream reverie, and he would imagine, what would it be like? What would this be like? Or what would that be like? Or what would happen if? And he would just go off and he would daydream about these things, and he would get these ahas about literally the nature of the universe. And then he would figure out the math to make it work. Does that make sense? And so when you're struggling with some limited worldview or a limited view of yourself, asking who says number one, and then turn it over. What if? What if I could solve this? What if I were smart enough? What if I were creative enough? What if I could do that? What if I could find the right people to help me? Does that make sense? Start asking those questions to expand your perspective outside the box, okay? And remember when little kids, a lot of times when kids are like 5, 6, and they've kind of learned a little bit of power, but, and it's time for bed, and you're getting ready for bed, and now it's time to go to bed, and what they come back with is, no, you're not the boss of me. Have you ever heard that before? You're not the boss of me. Well, I encourage you to use that with your limiting assumptions. You're not the boss of me. When a thought comes up that is anything other than loving to yourself, say, well, whoa, question that. Don't let these things slide in your consciousness. You're not the boss of me. Banish them. Get into your power stance. Remember Jim taught us that last year. Get into your power stance. Be gone, limiting assumption. Or stop in the name of love. Right? Just find ways to break out that box. Break out. Make sense? Okay, good. So now, I'm going to sum it up a little bit, and then we'll do our affirmation. Okay, so summing up, what we're looking at here is developing our internal locus of control versus our external locus of control. I have control over my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. And it's taking back that sense of control. Does that make sense? Because there really is, science is now catching up and saying there really is no out there, that it's all generated from in here. And I have a wonderful book called Mind to Matter that I just discovered. And I love this book. So I'm going to read you a little passage from it. And here it is. This is the everyday superpower you possess. Second by second, you're changing your brain by the way you use your mind. The consciousness of your mind is becoming the cells of the matter of your brain. What do you think of that? And another really awesome one is, they did some experiments with water and people's consciousness, okay? And they had people put a drop of water on a slide, and they would look at the slide under the microscope. And guess what? Everybody's drop of water was different. The water was from the same source, but this is what happened. Just as fingerprints of every one of the 8 billion people on the planet are unique, the energy field of each person is unique. When water passes through a person's energy field, the shapes it assumes are always the same, while different from the shapes produced by any other person. Okay? We have the power. We have the power. It is within us to just be that amazing, amazing creator that we know we've always wanted to be. So now, we're questioning our assumptions. We're reclaiming the power right? We're reclaiming power, we're questioning our assumptions, and we are appreciating ourselves. This is really important. We're mostly water, right? We want to have a loving imprint. So we're going to love ourselves. So right now, I want you to do this. Okay? I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to think about something that you really appreciate about yourself. You got it? Okay, now I want you to open your eyes, and I want you to pump your fists and go, yes! Yes! Okay, do you feel that? Do you feel it? Get your body involved in this process, okay? Get your body involved. Say yes, 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 yes. Okay, good. So find something to celebrate every day, every day. You are an amazing, magnificent being, and celebrate that, and get out of your boxes, right? Get out of those boxes. Okay, so I'm going to close with a poem by Rumi. I love this poem. The breezes at dawn have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Let's affirm. Together, and I want the fist pump with this, okay? Together, I affirm my power to change the way I think, feel, and act. I say yes to my magnificent. And so it is. Mwah!